Limerick, 1845. Slavery is a question in which every human being ought to feel a deep interest. I mean, it aims at and accomplishes the destruction of all the rights of men. It is an enemy of the entire human family. The principle that enslaves the black seems to enthrall the white, and the spirit of tyranny that for the last 300 years has made the children of Africa its victims, devotes everyone whom he now addressed to its cruel altar. It's a strange contradiction that in a human character, that in a country that boasts to be the freest in the world, slavery exists in the worst and most aggravated forms. A country that threw off the yoke of colonial bondage for a 3-penny tax on a tea, proceeding upon the principle that all men were equal, and yet is the propagator of the heinous crime of slavery. It is to slavery as it exists in the United States that I might be permitted to speak today, having endured of its woes and felt the bloody lash. I've been with the objection that slavery exists in Ireland and that therefore there's no necessity for describing its character as found in another country. My answer is that if slavery exists here, it ought to be put down, and the generous in the land ought to rise and scatter its fragments to the wind. But there is nothing like American slavery on the soil on which I now stand. Negro slavery consists not in taking away a man's property, but in making property of him and in destroying his identity, in treating him as the beast and creepy things. God has given the Negro a conscience and a will, but his conscience has no monitor to him, for he has no power to exercise his will. His master decides for him not only what he should eat and what he should drink, what he should wear and when and to whom he should speak, but how he should work and how much and by whom he's to be punished. He not only decides these things, but what is morally right and wrong. The slave must not even choose his wife, must marry and unmarry at the will of his tyrant. For the slaveholder has no compunction in separating man and wife, and is putting asunder what God had joined together. Could the most inferior person in this country be so treated by the highest? If any man exists in Ireland who so treated another, may the combined extraction of humanity fall upon him, and may he be excluded from the pale of humanity's sympathy. There are many good men in America, but the majority of the country and legislature are stained with blood. About 7 years ago, I escaped from my master, Thomas Auld, in Maryland, into Massachusetts, the freest of the free states. And I lived there until within the last 3 months, and my family are there still. And I escaped in 1838 and came to New Bedford. I got my livelihood by rolling oil casks, and the labor was sweet, for it was voluntary. And I received my own earnings, which were filched from me before my master. About 3 years after my escape, some gentleman hearing of my addressing meetings of the Black population on the subject of slavery induced me to go about lecturing through that state, concealing my name and the place from which I escaped, lest some Judas or Iago betrayed me. Having thus lectured for 4 years, a number of persons began to doubt if I was ever a slave. And I did not answer the Jim Crow description, which was given to Negroes at New York and in the theaters in this country. The people of the free state of Massachusetts thought from the description they had seen given of Negroes and from the fact of my having an education, the conclusion was come to by many that I was not a slave. This led me to publish a narrative of my life, in which I have detailed the crimes of the slaveholders and mentioned their names. That settled the question, but it endangered my safety. There have been 6,500 copies of the work sold from the time of its publication and may last till the 1st of August. Not deeming it safe to remain in America, I embarked at Boston on the 16th of August in the Cambria for this country, and I could not illustrate slavery better than by stating what took place on board the ship. The slaveholders got up a regular mob and threatened to throw me overboard. And they first manifested their feelings when they found I took a cabin passage and insisted that I go to the steerage. For it is the law of the skin at the other side of the waters that a Negro should not go into cabins with whites. I therefore to change to the steerage. And I was content with it, particularly when I reflected that every wave brought me further from the bloody and persecuting prejudice that drove me out of his country. Gentleman asked me where I was going, and soon he found out I was a fugitive slave. Considerable interest was excited on board, and there was a wish among the Scots, the English, and the Irish passengers that I should address them and give a narrative of my case. I well knew that I could not do so without the permission of the captain, and I accordingly declined. And some gentlemen, however, made interest with Captain Judkins, who gave the permission when he got in sight of Ireland. I little thought that we had American Democrats on board. The meeting was announced on the saloon or quarterdeck, and among the rest of the slaveholders made their appearance and would not allow me to speak. But the Hudson family being on board, being American abolitionists, they sang one of their beautiful songs and drowned the uproar. If an American ever comes among the speaking of his liberty country, may you make his cheek crimson by telling him there's not a single spot in all this land where a sable man can stand free.